Hey everybody, welcome to the Prophet Moffatt Show. Today we got George Bryant. How you doing, George?
Good, man. I'm stoked to be here.
Me too, man. I'm stoked to have you. I think I first came across you maybe a decade ago when you were
Yep.
doing a civilized caveman thing. And I know you're really big into branding, and we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. But have you noticed that the insurance company Geico has brought back the Geico caveman? And on a scale of 1 to 10, how good would you rate the branding of the Geico caveman?
So I heard about it, but I haven't seen it. But I heard it came back. I haven't seen it though, but I will go look so I can give an accurate grade on it, but I haven't seen it.
It was great. They even turned it into like a soap opera where they were contemplating about whether or not he should resurrect his career, and they were getting all emotional about it. And I just love insurance advertising, whether it's them or Liberty Bibberty or they're all like in competition who can out weird each other.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I just sit back on my side and the marketers and both of us. I'm like, wait, somebody in a room got paid like $1 million for this campaign to have a dude jump in the ocean by the Statue of Liberty for Liberty Mutual or like all of them. And I was like, man, what am I doing? I was like, I'm in the wrong, but I don't want to be in that bucket. But yeah, I laugh at those all the time.
Those writers' rooms must just be incredibly fun.
Yeah, and then the fact that like in that writer's room, because I've been behind in a few of them, it's so serious. Or like, this is the one that's gonna nail it. And I'm like, do you guys ever like done a focus test with the people who consume this? Like everybody's just ripping you. And like I know you're playing in the controversy, like put myself on blast bucket. But yeah, some of them are hilarious to me.
Yeah, it's funny. So I was just on your website and it reads right there make an impact, build an epic brand, build an epic empire, build an epic legacy where relationships beat algorithms. And I thought that was really intriguing. I was hoping maybe you could expand a bit about the part of relationships beating algorithms and what that means to you.
Yeah, man, I love this. And I'm stoked we're here. Yeah, because it's been a hot minute. And all the food similarities between me and Lindsay back in the day, and like here we are today. And so from the transition from that, food blogging career over into what I do now, right? The one thing that I say to people all the time is that scaling companies doesn't come from acquisition, it comes from retention, right? And retention comes from relationships, right? And I've been behind the scenes and helped multiple companies scale 2 to 1 billion, a couple hundred in the 8, 9 figure range. But we forget that in the name of the world that we live in, people don't just buy products, they build relationships with brands and movements and meaning, and they want to know who they're doing business with and how they're doing business. And truthfully, now in 2024, it's more prevalent than it's ever been because everybody's kind of got a line in the sand and AI is popping through the space. And so it's really interesting because like even anecdotally, right? Like I share an actual example of this with a supplement company that I help scale, right? Like supplement companies, like anybody with a physical product, like if somebody buys your product once and never uses it, you eventually run out of people to acquire a company with, right? And there's two really big parts to scaling a company. Number one is the product itself getting results, but number two is the community and connection that's required, because the brands that win and the companies that win, and even like you personally, anecdotally, one of the reasons that you've been so consistent for so long at the top of everybody's mind is because of how consistent you are with who you are, and people build an actual relationship with you. Like we've never hung out in person, but we've talked online for a decade,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
And we
yeah, it's weird. It's weird for you to say my name and the word consistent together because I'm like so consistently inconsistent. But in that inconsistency, I've just always been me.
yes.
And you're right. And so when I meet people for the first time, it often feels like we've known each other for a long time.
Yeah, like I feel like we're neighbors because like it's and it's all of it from the ups, the downs, but what it really is there's a relationship to be had with you because you're like, this is who I am, these are my values, this is what's here. And yeah, do you have an incredible skill set from copy and tools and marketing and experience? 1,000%. But human beings connect emotionally to human beings, and even in brand, and big brands and big companies, there's still an ethos or a soul to that brand of their values and their movement and what they stand for, right? And I joke with people like Nike's a really good example. Their billboards don't say just do it only if you wear our running shoes, or just do it only if you wear our clothing, right? There's this shared belief system and an identity. And so in every company that I've scaled, including like one of them, like one of the supplement companies, like when I came in, they're retention in their product was like 3.5 months, right? And they're like, oh, we're going to scale. I'm like, you're going to scale yourself out of business. Your acquisition cost is more than you're making back in lifetime value. And they're like, well, we're teaching them everything about the product. I'm like, they don't want a relationship with the product. Like, the choices that you make in the store have a little bit to do with product, but how many people have gone to a restaurant, had subpar food, but a high quality experience, and choose that restaurant over the restaurant with high quality food and a subpar experience, right? Or
Totally.
when you're buying a pair of shoes, right? Like, you might be like, oh, these are the best shoes, but you're like, oh, I love this brand and I've used them forever, and you have a relationship with it. So you stay loyal to that brand. And the joke and the thing that blows everybody's minds, I was like, we scaled that company with like 8 emails, but the 8 emails that went in weren't about the product. They were about the person. They were about connecting with the person and helping them. And like, retention went from 3.5 months to 15 months on the same acquisition cost, not
Wow.
because
Wow.
I told them like, oh, this product's better than everybody else, or like I have some secret on how to use it. But we built a relationship with the person. And so, like, when I say relationships beat algorithms, it doesn't matter whether it's you as the owner and you have a team of 50. The people that are interfacing with your customers, whether it's in your marketing, your sales, or your delivery, they're embodying like the ethos of a brand, and no different than brick and mortar, right? Like, we'll go into stores all the time. And I love your hot takes on the experiences you have in the world, but like, you'll go into a store and you'll feel the ethos of that company or that brand where anybody's interfacing with a customer. And it's that relationship that dictates that person's behaviors and the reputation and how much they share it with their friends and how much they talk about it and come back to it. It has nothing to do with the product itself. And so that's how I feel about relationships beating algorithms.
Interesting, because when you're talking, I'm often thinking, and the things that pop up into my head aren't necessarily the brands that I resonate with, but it's the ones that have ethos that I don't like, and which
Yep.
why I don't buy from them. Like, so when
Yep.
you're talking, I was thinking of Guitar Center.
Oh,
I have nothing against Guitar Center, but every experience I have when I go into Guitar Center is like some minimum wage employee pissed off that I'm about to buy a $2,500 guitar,
yep.
and they
Yep.
treat me as if I'm like Mr. Burns, some evil mastermind money genius who's there just to like rub it into them that they could never afford this. And that's always my experience with them. And then, like, when you're talking about shoes, I'm not going to name the company, but there's a certain shoe company, like, I just won't wear their shoes because I won't advertise their stuff if they're not paying me. But even if they were paying me, like, some of their, I guess, ethos, or the real ethos, not the one they're trying to portray, but the one that because I always talk about brand. You can do so many things to try to create your brand, but ultimately it's the consumers in the community who dictates what your brand truly is.
Yep, 1,000%. I'm so glad that you said this because I have a point for this that will help people a ton. But in the same vein, you think like Chick-fil-A, right?
I
Like,
don't think Chick-fil-A. I
I
mean,
think Chick-fil-A because I live in Montana and the rule with my daughter was we had to have a Chick-fil-A and I'm addicted to Chick-fil-A, right? But like,
I've never ate there.
every time I go through that window, and they in Montana, they hire kids that are 14 years old,
Oh
right? But
wow.
every time you're there, the customer service and experience, it's almost so positive, it's uncomfortable if you're having a bad day. You're like, hey, I just want to pee in my Cheerios today. Can you like not make me smile? But it's consistent across the board, right? And it dictates a lot. And that brand also gets a lot of hate for planting their flag in the ground on their beliefs of like, we're
Yeah,
not open on Sunday, right?
totally.
But they're unapologetic about it and they're consistent with it. And to your point about brand, right? There's an incredible book by Jonah Berger called Contagious. But in that book, he breaks down why things catch on, why things go viral, why people share things. And the reason human beings share is one of 5 reasons. And you nailed one of them. So it's humor, credibility, education, social status, or controversy, right? And the way that brand works is that like humor is like, oh, somebody can poke fun, they can laugh. When they share it or talk about it, it makes them look funny to the people in their life, right?
Yeah.
Credibility is if I'm associated, right? Like if I know something, if I've achieved something, the people in my life are going to see me as more credible. Social status is by being associated with this brand or this person, it's elevating my stature in the world, right?
Hmm.
Education is this brand has taught me something, empowered me with something that I can be like, hey, Jason, did you know XYZ, or that hyaluronic acid tightens your skin, or that like what's another one I used the other day? Oh, melatonin doesn't actually help you fall asleep. It prepares your body for a state of sleep, right? It's anything that allows me to educate the people I care about, with me as the one. And then the fifth one is controversy. And this is the one that everybody forgets about. This is the
Yeah.
one that human beings default to if they have a negative brand experience, right? Like, and even in our world, in internet marketing, I talk about this all the time with customer journey. But think about, since we've been in this game, because you've been in it longer than me, and I've been in since like 2010, right? You're like so excited to like sign up for this webinar or join this mastermind or download this lead magnet. And you're like, yeah, this is great. It's going to help me. But then you go to your inbox and it's not there. All of a sudden, that entire heightened emotional state of joy, of excitement turns into literally reactance. And you're like, they didn't send it to me. They cheated me, blank. And then if I'm like, hey, Jason, I'm about to download this lead magnet, should I get it? Your default can only be, no, it doesn't work. It's a piece of crap.
Yeah.
No, they didn't even follow up. Right. And so we forget about that in the lens of brand. And you nailed it. It's that brand, you can have your values and your movement, which is your belief system that builds a brand. But ultimately, it's the experience of the people that are in it that dictate how it's really, really done. And I think it was
Totally.
like 2020, I was giving a keynote in Boulder and Google was there. And they were like dropping stats left and right. And they're like, did you know that like 86+% of marketing is actually word of mouth marketing? And this was like in 2020, right? Because we think about the rise in social and the rise in conversations, and we forget how much we bond over the experiences in our life. But if you and I went to a marketing conference and we started asking people questions, the first thing they're going to tell us after not seeing them is every good experience they had and every bad experience they had with brands and content. And this one's doing X and this one's doing Y. And
Totally.
so that's why for me, like authentic, consistent, and congruent relationships are at the forefront of everything if you want to be able to scale.
Totally. You gave me a great idea for a food truck called Devil's Chicken, and it's only on Sundays, and you just park outside of a Chick-fil-A. So you'd get the controversy, you'd get the humor, you could blare maybe Ozzy Osbourne over the thing, or maybe you could get like a satanic music video guy to support your truck or something. Oh my gosh. Um,
By the way, that's one of my favorite parts of your brain, though, is like you live in inversion theory or contrarian. Like I love
so
your
much.
angles and takes on this because I'm like, I love that sharing that your first thought is like food truck outside of Chick-fil-A. I'm like, it's genius. And I
Yeah,
love that that's how your brain works. It's such a
yeah,
gift.
it is. It's so contrarian to the point that it's yeah, like I was just reading something recently, like a few minutes ago, too, basically saying that woman was saying, yeah, if you really want to grow your brand huge, you really need to Walmart it, or like appeal to the Walmart kind of people, the masses. And that might not always be true, but I think for the most part, trying to make something a household name or a really big thing is really smart. And that's not how my brain works. I like run away from that. I want to be the unique person who is doing the thing that nobody else is doing. And it can work, but it often is difficult to grow really huge. And
Mm-hmm.
I've always been a big proponent too of, making large amounts of money with small amounts of people, like finding your tribe, finding the right people. And you seem to done really well with that, particularly, you know, you say something that makes me cringe when other people say it, and that's running a heart-centered business.
Mm-hmm.
And when I see people say that, I instantly go, "Oh, they're going broke." And most of the people say it. It's usually women. They're repulsed by the type of selling that most males do, or just aggressive sales folks do. And most people don't want to be like that. And to the point that I think it becomes so detrimental. Like, I want to build a heart based business. I'm like, oh, I mean, you don't want to sell anything? Because that's 99% of the time. Anyone who mentions the word heart centered, I instantly lump them over to like, no chance they're going to be successful.
Yep.
You use that word, and I think it's worked for you.
It has. It has. And full credit, because there's a book on this, and I've had him on the podcast, Bob Berg, but the book The Go Giver, right? Like
Okay.
it's an incredible book on like the principles of giving, but like in my opinion, selling is service. Where I draw the line is I'm not selling to somebody who isn't inquiring or asking for a sale, right? Like people have no problem hiring a personal trainer, even though all the workouts they would ever need are on the internet, right?
Yeah.
And Olympians have coaches, even though coaches haven't won gold medals, right? There's always this semblance of like, I want to grow. And for me, heart centered means being in alignment with like knowing that I can serve and support somebody, but also being willing to draw the line. Because for every person I say yes to, I probably say no to like 7 people. And I'm like, hey, listen, as much as you think this is the best investment, I want you to keep that money and go do A, B, and C and call me in 90 days,
Yeah.
because then we can like cook with magic, right? I'm like, let me help you, let me serve you. And
Totally.
so, my ethos in business has always been you have to win before I win. But really, it's like speed dating and using results to speak to it. And to your point, I see it all the time where like people think information is the secret, but it's not. It's implementation, right? Like
Yeah.
we grew up in a time where like we lived through that phase of like everybody thought the more courses they owned, the more products they bought, the better their results would be. And then they ended up with a Dropbox folder with a terabyte of stuff that was never implemented, right? And so I go in this route because my reputation is everything for me, right? And I know that that's the only thing I can stand on. And even to your point, I've lived my life like you have. Like I've been pretty public about like the rises and the falls and like the lessons and my tears all over social and everything.
Yeah.
But my reputation is everything. And I've worked my entire life to let when my name comes out of somebody's mouth that they've had a tangible win in their life. And so for me, being heart centered is being in alignment both with my values, but also confidently knowing that I can support you. And I've had plenty of clients where I'm like, hey, listen, this sounds like a great idea. And I'm pretty sure I can do it, but I won't quit until we figure it out. And they're like, great, here's 6 figures. And I'm like, great, because like it's honest and it's real. But I've had also plenty of people, and I've had dudes be like, hey, I'm going to hire you right now. I'm like, bro, you're being a little aggressive. They're like, well, I'll double it. And I'm like, I tried to give you the a-hole tax and you said yes. Like, no, we can't work together. Right. Like, I don't want to be in a transactional machine because, like, to your point, and being as long as I've been in this, like, you and I have been connected online for 10 years. I have so many people like that I run into, and we've gone through seasons together. And I want my name to be associated with something of value and integrity and values, not like, oh, he sold himself out to scale this offer to this like transactional machine, or had this mastermind that everybody joined and he made millions of dollars, but nobody got results. And so for me, Heart Center just speaks to the fact that like I believe in what I do, and I want the people who come in to feel like they want to be there, not need to be there. And that's the
Yeah.
part that I draw the line. And I've had to learn this lesson too, because at the height of my career, I shifted pretty hard because I had some pretty big life things happen. And then I went into that service bucket. But then after about a year of like just serving everybody faces off, I had a few people like, well, can I even hire you? And I'm like, oh, like I forget to say those things and forget to make those offers. And so the way that I relate it now, especially from that book, The Go Giver, I'm like, it's like standing at an ATM machine and wishing money to come out, but you miss the fact you have to put the card in, type a PIN code in, and hit withdraw. And so for me, I realized for my own integrity that in order for me to feel comfortable asking, I want to know that I can help you and I've served you before. And so I've just built my business around the lens of like anybody can get on my calendar for free. I'll do a call with you, I'll help you, I'll support you. And most of the time, like, what do you have to sell me? I'm like, nothing. I just wanted to help you. Like, go put this into practice, see if this works. But then when the time comes, I'm like, hey, I see this crystal clearly. If you hire me to be your personal trainer, not that I'm a personal trainer, but a marketing to help you scale and
Yeah.
do your customer journey, here's what I see. And I can confidently put my name on that line and be like, great, pay me. Right. This is a mutual win win. And so that's kind of how I've navigated it.
I love that. I love that you prioritize their win first. It reminds me, my mentor Frank Kern. He
Yep.
does a thing called results in advance. He's like,
Yep.
you can just get somebody a result, and it. I have a tagline like, I'm the win-win-win guy, and so if you and I were to work together, it's like I need you to win, I need to win, of course, but more importantly, the customers that we're creating stuff for, it's important. It's the most important that they win. So it's kind of like the trifectas of win. So
Mhm.
you often hear win-win deals. I'm all about the win-win-win deals.
I love that. And like truthfully, like I take this principle into everything that I do. Even when I'm scaling companies that have like a $17 product and a $10,000 offer, the way that I look at this is like our industry and market is so saturated with noise, right? And everybody, when it's so noisy, is comparing on features and benefits. And I'm like, hey, I see their features and benefits and I raise you results. So here, just take this for free and go do this. And all of a sudden, we're playing on different fields because they're like, like even when I go keynote, like I've never sold from stage. I've never accepted money for a keynote. I've done them all for free. And I'm like, cover my travel, just let me come serve. And like everybody in the room has a back table, right? And I
Yeah.
open up and I'm like, and I don't mind saying, I'm like, and by the way, before I give my talk, I'm the only one not paid to be here. And I don't have a back table and I have nothing to sell you. So if I can help
Wow.
you after, just come ask me a question. And genuinely, all of a sudden, and that's created multiple seven-figure wins in an audience that I didn't even sell. But over the next 3 to 4 months, every single one of those people reached out to me. We got connected. They hired me for coaching and consulting. And it was because I was in integrity. And so like when I think about this, like I think the mistake that people make is they like think that value, by just giving value, someone's going to get a win, or just by giving information, someone's going to get a win, but it has to be integrated. So I'll give, but I give with containers. Like I'll jump on a call and be like, hey, I'll help you for an hour. And I'm like, but by the way, after this, if you don't do this or change this, or you need any more, we're going to have to talk about like working together. But I also give them real evidence in their life, whether it's a framework, whether it's a result to follow. And it happens at every level, even in content. Like I hate collecting emails because truthfully, as good as I am at email, I don't like sitting down to write them. I just don't.
Really?
No, I'll do them for everybody else. Like I write copy for my clients sometimes and all that stuff. But when it comes to my own, I'm like, I'd rather just get on a video and like talk to you. And so like I'll make these trainings that just are in a Google Doc and there's like a full 30-minute seminar in there with actual tangible results. And I will just give it away to people. And I'm like, no, no, go take this. I heard this is your problem. I want you to go put this into practice and call me when it works and let me know how it goes.
What percentage of people, when you give something away for free, do you think actually implement that?
It's a great question. In my world, I would say probably roughly 10%. But the
Which, which most people hearing this would think that's shockingly low. And I'm here to say, after 20 years of doing it, is shockingly high.
shockingly high. And
It's
and here's the truth too though. Like from a psychology perspective, most of the time I give it because like if you think about like the 4 stages of competence that somebody goes through and they're learning something new or changing something, right? Like the big words are like unconsciously incompetent, consciously incompetent. I call it unaware, aware, learning, and mastery, right? And everybody goes through that cadence at their own pace, right? And so I have this one training called the wedge of expectations, which is really just how to be consistent by setting a floor and a ceiling for your goals every day. And I have client galore who asked me for it 4 times over a year. And then finally on the fourth one, they're like, I'm so ready to use it. And then they use it and they're like, I'm ready to come in. For me, it's not even about whether anybody implements it, but it's that I get to install a social trigger or a positive association with myself because their last interaction with me is like, hey, I had a question. Everybody else said I had to pay them to get on their calendar. George just sent me the training for free. And so a month later, they'll hear my podcast or see a social post or someone will be like, hey, have you ever heard of George? And their only thought is, yeah, and the last interaction, he sent me something for free and I didn't even implement it. Holy moly, I need to reach out, right? It's also reputation management. And so I think about all the free coaching I've gotten. Like I've gotten so much value from your posts, like just reading them and some of the resources you've shared. And I've downloaded some of them and they're still sitting in a downloads folder somewhere. But then every time I see your name, I'm like, oh man, that time Jason gave me that. Oh yeah, that thing that Jason said. And so there's multiple games at play here. And I think the mistake that I made for a long time that people make is they're constantly playing the short game, but they're forgetting about the impact of the long game.
totally. I think a lot of people too, when they strive to deliver value, whether it's a lead magnet or whatever it may be, they want to over deliver to show how heart centered they are or whatnot. And I often in my trainings, I'm like, your perfect lead magnet should be like, it should be able to be consumed in 3 to 5 minutes, and they should be able to instantly go get a result of some sort right away. I'm like,
Yep.
that kind of lead magnet will crush your 6 hours of training all day long. It's like
Yes.
you just need to get just some micro movements to just to get it started, the
Yep.
snowball. And
You nailed that. That's probably one of the biggest mistakes that I see is the more trap, right? More information, more blank. Jonah Berger's other book, The Catalyst, talks about the things that get in the way of somebody actually changing. And the first thing that happens is called reactance. And so somebody downloads this thing and like, oh, I'm so excited to get this. And then they open 17 12-minute videos, and immediately their anti-missile guidance system goes up. And what we assume is like, oh, they're just not ready to do it. But we forget the long stream effects of that. That last person's interaction with us with a no. They saw complication. They didn't see consistency. It was a knock on their confidence. But to your point, is that everything happens in micro wins and moments, and you can't get somebody from the 0 to the 100 without going through the mile markers. And
yeah,
so more doesn't equal value. But here's what's so funny about like your mentor and the way that we've been in this world, the people that are at the highest levels. If I was like, hey, you can pay me 50 grand for a solution and I can give it to you in 5 minutes, or you can pay me 50 grand for a solution, I can give it to you in 52 videos that are 30 minutes each. You're always going to choose the 5 minutes.
yeah,
And so it's also about understanding the customer journey that people are taking and like what gives them results that helps them become the best customer. Cause like also, like I say this in clients that I'm scaling and even myself, my job isn't to find my ideal customer, it's to create them.
oh wow, explain that.
Yeah. So a lot of people fall into this bucket of like, oh, I need to find these people in pain. I need to find these people in pain, right? Like normal marketing. I'm like, well, great. If I put 100 people in a room, maybe 10 of those people are going to identify with that and be ready to go. But I have 90 people that are also 1 to 3 to 5 touch points, education points, or connection away from being that 10. And what we do is we find the 10 out of 100, and then we're like, great, give me 100 more, give me 1,000 more. And I'm like, but when you do the rough math, if I grabbed 1,000 people that had that experience and I put them in an auditorium, I'm like, hey, do me a favor. Put your hand up if you had a positive interaction with me. 100 hands go up. And I'm like, put your hand up if you had a negative, didn't get results, and felt like you wasted your attention with me. And 900 hands go up. And that's the math that people miss, right? Like you think
Yeah,
about it in real life, like how many times have we walked into, well, let's not use Guitar Center, but a store and window shopped and then came back to that store after 2 or 3 times and then eventually bought. Most people only focus on the ones that are right there right now, and they forget about the fact that the most valuable asset that you have is attention. And if somebody pays it to you, but they're not ready to move, you still capitalize on the attention. And if you save the relationship or add some semblance of value, then you win the game. And so even in like clients in like the digital product space that I help scale, when they like have a webinar and I'm like, great, like we converted 15% of that webinar. I'm like, what are we going to do for all the other people that watched it that didn't convert? And they're like, and I'll have them make a training to give them the first part of what they would cover anyways and send it out to everybody. Be like, hey, we know you were interested. This will help you get started.
smart.
This will identify your niche and boom, boom, boom. And we customer journey it. And then all of a sudden, the next webinar, the conversion goes from like 15% to like 60%. And I'm like, well, because you gave them tangible results. But if I already spent the dollars or the energy, rather owned, earned, or paid marketing, and I have them, we make the mistake of just letting them fall into the black hole. But at some point, they were interested.
Yeah, people are so overwhelmed, and so it's easy to see how they fall off. So, speaking of putting people in rooms, I see that you have an event coming
Mm-hmm.
up in Montana
Yep, in April.
later in the year. Tell us a
Yeah.
little bit about the event and who's the ideal kind of person to come to that event.
Yeah, well, we just wrapped one like 3 weeks ago. So here's the interesting thing, and I think you get this better than anybody. I teach frameworks and principles that apply to every level of business. So at this last event, we had I haven't made $1 online and 2 7 and 8 figure businesses in the room. all learning the same thing. And
Oh,
so I
wow.
used to do them in hotels, and then I was like, screw this, I want connection. And so we rent a house like on the river in the mountains, and I would call it more of a retreat mastermind where everybody co-works together, but we focus on marketing for scale, customer journey for scale, and then really the mindset required to be a successful entrepreneur. And we spend 3 days basically teaching and co-working and collaborating with each other. And we do customer journey, we do marketing, our elevation content framework on how to be everywhere all the time. And everybody wins because you have people that are learning from people that have been in it long enough. But then the best part is watching them learn to come back to the basics and start doing
Yeah.
what they forgot to do in the first place that worked. And so we cap it at 30 people because we crave that connection and want everybody to know everybody's name. And then we only charge basically cost for the tickets because I just genuinely love serving people's faces off. But yeah, we do 3 full days. It's me facilitating normally 1 or 2 other business partners or speakers, and it's very collaborative. So we teach a concept and then we apply it. We're like, how would this work in your business? Here's how we'd build this customer journey. Here's how you can do this and scale. And so we've had everybody from coaches, chiropractors, physical products, retreat people, accountants, realtors, and we always kind of have this big gamut of experience to share together. And so we have the next one coming up in April because everyone was like, we want the next one. So I'm pretty sure half the tickets are sold already from everybody who was at the last one. But yeah, so we focus heavily. And like for me, I've kind of, you'll appreciate this, I've kind of coined myself the Robin Hood of marketing, to where these companies pay me, copious amounts of money to come in and help them scale from 7 to 8 or 8 to 9 figures. And then I turn around and come teach it to everybody at the event. And I'm like, hey, here's what they're doing. Here's what
Nice.
we're
Oh,
doing.
smart.
Here's where we're going.
That's rad. I think the idea of co-working and collaborating is so huge, and it's part of the big reason that I moved here to Nashville. This town co-writes. It's a town of country music singers, songwriters, and there's thousands of songwriters in this town, and they literally go to work every day. They like punch into a clock, and the different record labels set them up with different co-writes, and they spend a lot of time like bouncing ideas and going back and forth and really working through things to finally get the song to pitch to a Blake Shelton or Miranda Lambert. And it's amazing to see just the process of bringing different people together with different skill sets to help someone create something that is infinitely better than what somebody would have done on their own
Mm-hmm.
most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's wild. And so I've been toying with the idea of having copywriting co-write sessions. I don't know any of my friends that I've actually said, hey, let's write a letter together. And what would that look like? And what are the likelihoods that it actually gets done?
Mm-hmm.
Probably significantly higher. And just, it's an interesting concept. And I think I would like to host something like that. And then I think of like speed dating comes to mind too. What would like speed writing and collaborating all look like together? Could you like get 10 copywriters and move them like, hey, you each got 10 minutes to write, and then move,
Mm-hmm.
move, move. And then at the end of that 2 hours, I bet you somebody would have more in their notebook
A
than they'd
thousand
ever
percent.
imagined.
Bro, Parkinson's law, man. It's massive. Like that's the like the most humbling part for me about doing events. Like I love curating the room and like sharing all my models and tactics and like everything that I've used to scale all these companies. But truthfully, I learn more than I give, because every single person's perspective of like how it lands for them and like how they do things. And like to your point earlier, and the reason that you've been consistently inconsistent, but also has maintained the endowment that you've created with people, is because of that perspective and your experience and you sharing all those things so openly. But like to that point, like you grab somebody, I go into these events and I'm like teaching my own model and I'm like, holy moly. They're like, well, yeah, but if you thought of this and if you thought of this and if you thought, and I'm like, I like start writing down notes. I'm like, oh, changing that here, like going back here. And then that collaboration allows you to also pull out your own unique view and identity, but also you have that positive peer pressure or Parkinson's law, which you'll fill whatever container you create, that I know the number one thing for creatives, right? Like I had Satsang on the podcast and we were talking about this and we were joking that the only song that's ever done is the one you hit publish on, right? Like
Yeah.
the only art piece that's ever finished is the one you hang on the wall. And you and I both know from a copy perspective, the only copy that's ever really done is the one that you send. Because if not, we will
Yeah.
work on that thing for a decade and nobody will see it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so,
I have hundreds of letters that
yeah.
have never seen the light of day.
And even the process of creating those letters is what iterates you into the confidence to kind of make the next one, because also not every ingredient goes into the kitchen in a Michelin star restaurant. They have them and they use some of them, but they pull them out, but it leads to clarity. And so I love that point, because like that's my favorite part, is even at the events when I'll put them into like customer journey breakdowns. So I'm like, all right, go to a group of 4 and you guys have 10 minutes to design your customer journey. And that's 2.5 minutes each. Like, oh, I can't. And then they'll get done and they're like, holy moly, I have this and this and this and this and this. And I was like, well, yeah, because you will fill whatever container you create. And even my CEO, Ashley, she does this in our stuff. Well, she won't work independently. She'll co-work and she'll grab a couple of our customers and jump on Zoom and do a co-working session with our customers as she's mapping their onboarding while they're working on something and getting iterative feedback on it that we're about to put them into. And they're like, well, yeah, what about this? And this would feel great. And like, we'd like that if that was in the onboarding. And so that's a genius idea, dude. And
Yeah.
very rarely, and the only person I've ever seen like do something similar, but wasn't just about copy, is Andre Chaperone with like his tiny little business.
Dude, Andre was one of the first people I learned from in
Me too.
2005.
Yeah, that's who taught me too.
So I originally, a woman named Lynn Terry, who actually lives in Tennessee. I should go see her before I leave Tennessee. She lives about an hour east of me. Her and Andre created this community called Turning Ideas into Dollars, I think in 2005. And I've never met Andre in person, but I mean, we go way, way back.
No, we just do a lot of Skype calls with him in Gibraltar. Like
Yeah.
I'm the same way, man. Like it's actually really, really funny because Andre taught me probably 2008, 2009 when I was doing email and like really getting into it when I was getting out of the Marine Corps. And I learned his soap opera sequence and like
Yeah.
everything with autoresponder madness, right? And
Yeah.
then I ended up consulting these companies, right? And I learned it and I was like, wait, this works really well for product companies, but there's like a couple holes in it, like in what I'm trying to achieve. And then I gave him full credit every single time. I was like, no, this is Andre's, this is Andre's, this is Andre's. So randomly one day I get an email. It's like, this is Andre Chaperone. Who are you? And then I was like, hi, I'm George. Like, thanks for teaching me. We jump on a call and I had to learn how Andre processes. So we have this like 90-minute call, right? And he's like asking me questions, but then like really like not speaking a lot. And he's just like totally taking it in. And I'm like, oh man, like I ruined this relationship. Like I have no idea, right? And then 2 days later, I get an email from him and he Andre'd me. He drew out
Oh
every
my
single
gosh.
thing that I said and talked about. And he's like, dude, like how you improve this is huge. Can I like reference this? Then he took an audio clip of me in my video and put it on a sales page. And like we've been friends since then because like I just that's how we met. But like he taught me all of this back in the day. And like that's where I learned customer journey to begin with and the things
So,
that I teach now.
so smart. You know, I see, I'm not going to name any names, but I see a ton of entrepreneurs lifting would be a kind, stealing content nowadays, right? And, or repurposing it. And if they would just say, I learned this from Zig Ziglar, I'm going to teach it to you now. You you still get to teach. People still credit you from teaching them. You now get to align yourself with one of the greatest salespeople that ever graced the earth.
Yep.
And it's just so much more impactful than trying to steal this thing. Everyone knows where it came from. Not everyone, but
Most.
those of us who have been in it. And I see guys, it's kind of weird because I see guys absolutely crushing it with blatant theft.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I love how you just said, you know, you just gave Andre credit for it. And look what happened in it. You know, it developed a great relationship, and
I have
what ended up happening is You won, he won, and most importantly, the other people
The
won.
other people won. And dude,
Yeah,
I have hundreds of those stories because I early on as an entrepreneur, right? Like I started as a food blogger. I didn't know what I was doing. I thought I was going to be a Marine for 30 years, right? And then all of a sudden this new thing is like dropped in my lap. And I didn't like take courses or anything. I just self-taught everything, similar to you, right? Like
yeah.
I know your whole story. So like very similar to you. Like I taught myself food blogging, food photography, affiliate marketing, web design, like and I just made more mistakes than anybody. I'm like, all right, here's what to do and not to do. But then I had that massive insecurity because I'm like, why are people asking me how to do this? Like I don't really know. But I'll never forget in the recipe world, and you know this from Lindsay, right? Like every single recipe is stolen. Every one of them. There's no original recipes. It's been like 5,000 years, right? And there was this like one thing where I was like, everyone's like ripping recipes. And then there was a rule that like, if you changed one ingredient, it was taken from. If you changed two, it was inspired by. If you changed three or more, it was your own original recipe, right? And I remember there was this like line for me where I was like, oh, but like I kind of made this and I don't know. And then I was like, screw it, I'll just give credit. And I
Yeah,
was like, even if like I saw somebody's recipe and I didn't share any ingredients, I'm like, no, I saw this from Lindsay and it inspired this. And bro, that blog went from like 200,000 views a month to like 7 million views a month when I started doing that. And then it like changed the game for me. But even to your point, you end up getting so much. Number one, people know your values, they know they can trust you. You get borrowed authority because you're being open and honest. And then it only enhances your ability to teach because you have anchors and social triggers. But a similar point is Jonah Berger. And Jonah Berger is an author who wrote Contagious, Invisible Influence, Magic Words, and The Catalyst, which are literally the four best marketing customer journey books that have ever existed. I've read The Catalyst and Contagious at least 100 times. No joke. Like I can quote pages, chapters, models, frameworks. And similar vein, I used to run masterminds back in the day when I was in Temecula. And he never speaks, he never does anything. But I got an email one day and it was like, who are you? And it was from Jonah Berger. And he's like, everybody says your name. And I'm like thinking through and I'm like, God, I probably talk about that book like 50 times a day. And I'm like, no, no, Jonah Berger said this. Jonah Berger wrote this. But I
yeah,
have
yeah,
like hundreds of those that have led to some of like the best relationships in my life where everything is win, win, win. And it really is just like speaks to your ability and your confidence and authenticity because like truthfully all of us, and whether it's Frank or sales tapes or Andre or Tony or Zig or you know, get all the personal development down to like Garrett Earnhardt who created it all like 100 years ago, we're all ripping from somebody. And truthfully, yeah, some of us have like original ideas, but there is zero loss in giving credit and representing what's there. And I'll even do it in people that I don't wholeheartedly agree with. Like, you know, Gary, for example, right? Vaynerchuk, right?
uh-huh.
I think the dude's awesome, right? Like, I love him. He knows his flavor. Do I agree with everything he
Yeah,
does or
no,
says?
yeah.
Absolutely not. But there are times where I'm talking and I'll be like, hey, if you're romantic about how you do business, you'll go out of business. And I'm like, oh, yeah. And by the way, Gary Vaynerchuk said that, right?
Yeah,
Or,
dude, I used to watch Gary Vaynerchuk way back in the early Wine Library TV days.
yeah.
And here's what's crazy. I never had wine in my entire life. I hate wine. I did not like Gary. I thought he was annoying. I wanted to reach through my screen and just pop him one. But I kept watching and I kept watching and kept watching and became really endeared to him. And then I actually met him and I saw how engaged he was with people. I mean, just so present and so just genuinely interested in helping. And so he reminds me of you in a lot of ways. And then I seen him again like a year or two later, and he remembered me. And I was like, how could this guy possibly remember me with the millions of people that he's meeting? And it really, I'm the same way. Like I'm a huge Gary fan. There's times where I think some things, yeah, I'm not on board, but a lot of times, another thing that popped into my head too. I'm about to consider doing this. I'm about to start teaching some guitar lessons, and I'm not
Mm.
I'm not a very proficient guitar player, but I think that's very helpful because the larger market is people who struggle like I have, and so I teach very basic elementary stuff. And at the end of my videos, I'm considering saying, like, look, if you like this video, but you want to take it another step further. Well, Marty can show you, he's got a lesson where he goes into the theory and he goes into all these things that I don't necessarily cover. And this is a wildly competitive niche where it is so hard to stand out against these guys, especially the ones that have been there for 10 years. Like, well, what if I just edify them and promote them in my stuff? I bet that would be a valid strategy.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't done it yet, but it's in the plans to do.
Well, 1,000%. And even to your point on the bigger market, right? Like the amount of people that struggle with anything and the correlations of the things that you're also going to find people that struggle to be consistent with their workout or their copywriting or their email marketing or showing up in content that also like to consume things. Like I watch my partner and she just watches videos of people like cleaning their room and like resonates with their content. It's like therapy of like time lapses of like, you're watching them do what? Right. And but it also brings this access. And I think to your point too, like I'm really like reflecting in this moment of like almost like every big win that's actually been tangible and measurable in my career has come on the back end of a relationship. And those relationships come from most of my relationships, like even with you, has come from I'll share your content when you post it. I'll give you credit when you post it and like being there and edifying the person, but also just giving credit to where credit is due, which has built in humility as well of like just constantly learning and being a student. But like every one of them, like the stages that I've stood on and the keynotes that I've given, like aren't because I have this speaker reel. It's because I learned from somebody. I gave them credit. I came across their radar. We connected. They came on my podcast and they're like, hey, by the way, I have this event. I've been thinking about you. Do you want to come like keynote it? Right. Like it's such a win-win-win game in the
Yeah.
lens of like how you describe it. And truthfully, it's so nauseating to me seeing it because like my stuff gets ripped all the time and I just smile. I'll go comment on it. I'm like, oh my God, this is incredible. Like, how do you do this? Like, how do you apply this? Right. Like, it doesn't bother me at all. But there's so much more to be gained because then I think about the people that teach my stuff or then like reach out and like, oh, do you want to come on my podcast and teach it? Do you want to speak in my room and teach it? Like, hey, can I bring you in for an expert call with my community? Right. Like it just changes the lens in which people see you. And I think that that's why relationships are so important to me. But I love that idea.
Yeah, with like the rapid like evolution of digital marketing, like what emerging like trends do you think are going to have like the most significant impact on how businesses connect with their audiences in the next few years?
Oh, I love this question. This is actually forefront and center right now. Even every single one of my one-on-one clients where we're focusing on scaling their businesses right now, like what I love is that the rise of AI, the sped up process of like all the overconsumption during COVID has led
Hmm.
to this like almost consumer required authentic connection for things to work, right? Like I'm seeing webinars that used to work, not work. I'm seeing sales letters that used to work, not work. And the only thing that's replacing them is like an authentic DM connection or like taking 20 seconds to send a video. And it's like, my nerdy little heart is like, finally, people are craving depth over width, but it's happening at like rapid paces where I'm watching people lose 6 figures a month because they're trying to put people in systems and they're putting them in processes that are eliminating the one thing that everybody needs, which is connection, right? Like I teach people this. I'm like, every decision a human being makes is an emotional based decision, right? Like nowhere have you ever been ready to take your credit card out and then somebody made you feel unsafe and you're like, here's my money, right?
Yeah,
Or transacted with you or disrespected you. And so what I appreciate is it's almost bringing my mission to life to where like they have to win before you win because no one's being interested in being told they're constantly in pain anymore, they're broken anymore, and I have your answer and my 3-step system. And they're like, yeah, but what about me? Like,
yeah,
where do I get? And so, like, the way that I've described it to people is like, people are no longer paying for information, they're paying for integration, but they have to know, like, and trust you to be able to do that. And even in like, there's a supplement company I'm scaling right now. We just grabbed all 4 family members that own the company and put them forefront and center at the face of the brand. And we're like, hey, these are the people building this business. Like, this is why they do it. And the endowment is huge. And so people like want to know who they're doing business with. And I think
totally.
the time that we've been in this and we see this, people try to hide in the content, in the marketing, in the pieces, and think that you can just automate a 66-part video course and someone's going to get results, or, oh, set
Yeah.
it and forget it. I have a passive business now. And I'm like, no,
What about customer support? Like I'm in a particular group where everyone's just pissed because they're trying to get customer support and they're just getting back this templated AI response, and and they're just absolutely frustrated. And I remember, I feel like I'm always such a trendsetter on the forefront. Back in 2010, I used to take my customer support guy, and if you went to my website, Profit Moffatt, up in the corner, there was a live Ustream broadcast going every day, and he was there live. And if you had
Yep.
any question about any product that you had bought or that you were considering buying, you could talk to a real human being. Now, of course, I didn't have volume to
Yeah.
the point that, but people were just baffled that they could come to my website and talk to a real dude.
Bro, I mean, think about all the times like good luck trying to call the government, right? Like how crazy of a world that we live in that like when you get a human, it's like orgasmic for you on the phone, right? You're like, oh my God, like I get to talk to a real person, right?
Yeah,
Like what I tell people is like, I think all too often in business, we forget who pays our bills. And the people that pay our bills are the ones we're trying to disconnect from the most, but they're the ones who are literally the bloodline of your business, your customers, like their desires, their wants, their support, right? You can't get in the way of that. Like we even had a company that I helped scale a couple of years ago. And to the point of using automations and AI, they had a product that it was a ring. So there was a lot of sizes and like customer service issues. They had a customer service team of 19 people. It was killing the company. And I was like, we can reduce this to two and we can use automations correctly to collect information that allows a human to show up really quickly with like a tailored answer, personalized response, and support. But like people want to do business. Like we go into these in-person businesses, restaurants and stores, and like it drives me nuts when I go into a restaurant now and I'm talking to somebody like, okay, put your order in on the iPad. And I'm like, yeah, but you're like right here, right? Like you're standing next to me. Like, hey, I have an issue with this. Oh, you didn't put it in the order. Well, yeah, I would have asked you for extra sauce or extra blank, right? Like we crave this connection. And it's really the difference because to your point, I think everybody forgets about their reputation and how quickly it shifts and how quickly it can change. And so you can have a customer who's in one of your programs that really just has a small inconvenience that can be addressed. But the moment they get put into automation, tailored email response, blank, 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 that small inconvenience turned into a refund and a chargeback, all because they just wanted to communicate with somebody. And
totally.
I'm like, and then it's not just a chargeback or a refund, it's now a refund. And every person in that person's ecosystem is going to be told not to do business with you.
Yeah.
And like that's the part that I think is so, so crazy because then you look at like the brands and the companies that are winning. And I say this to people all the time. People start scaling their businesses and then they hit a plateau. And I'm like, because you thought you could remove the things that made you successful in the first place. And every time I'll go in, I'm like, hey, what did you do 6 months ago that you're no longer doing? They're like, oh, I used to send a video to onboard my clients, or I used to send them a loom in the email. I'm like, what are you doing now? A template? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, well, I wonder why it's not converting. Like you allowed scale for you to hire
Yeah,
out.
man. We used to do individualized videos and we stopped doing it. And we used to do personalized cards, to their house in the mail. I mean, that's a huge one. I'm surprised more people don't do it, especially if you tell someone to like, "Hey, I sent this to you. Like, put a refrigerator magnet on it so you see that this message every day." Kind of thing. It's like
Yes.
anytime you can create an action that somebody does every day, and if they're crediting you for it, I mean, it's absolute money, money. Which brings me to my last question to you perfectly. Do you have any daily habits or routines that you think have been instrumental in your success as an entrepreneur or
Oh my
consultant?
God. 1,000%. Like, and you know this publicly, like I lost 100 pounds 2 years ago because I was chunky muffin, right? Because like I wasn't consistent with anything. And so I do 1,000%. And
I need this because I'm chunky muffin right now.
yeah,
So
yeah. And so I'll teach a quick model, but I'll also give an overview of this because I think entrepreneurs, we forget that we're in probably the hardest professional sport that exists and the rules of the field change every single day. Right. And the biggest thing that was happening to me is I was becoming a victim of my business and the market instead of choosing how I played the game every day. So I share this analogy with my clients and I'm like, you have to earn the right to touch your business every day. And they're like, well, what do you mean? And I'm like, Can you imagine, and I'll just pick a random sports analogy, if Tom Brady was down in that Super Bowl and we let him on the field in his pajamas and expected him to win the game and come back from 30 points, right? Like flip-flops, no pads, no helmet, right? I'm on the field. And they're like, yeah, he would not win. I'm like 1,000%. So why, when you wake up every day, is the first thing you do check social, check your phone, and let the world dictate your emotions? And they're like, oh crap. And I'm like, yeah. So here's how I break it down. So my day is broken up into 4 core components in my day. I have 4 buckets. I have my heart, my mind, my body, and my business, right? The business part's the easiest one. The heart, mind, and body are, for me personally, like, I have this belief that, like, and Alex Sharfin has said this for years, you don't have the business you want because you haven't become the person to run it yet, right? And so there's this semblance of our future self of like, what got us here won't get us there. And so for me, I list out the 4 buckets where I'm like, hey, if I do these things every day, they're going to make me the best version of myself or have the best chance of success. So for me, my heart is my faith. My body is my actual physical body. My mindset, to your point, is like consuming personal development or learning something or stretching something that I know or I want to know. And then my business is the 3 core needle movers in my business, right? So clockwork, Mike McAllowitz, like, what are my 3 queen bee roles or my daily tasks, right? So my rule is really, really simple. I can't touch those 3 items until I've done 1 item from each bucket before the day starts. And so for each item, like under my heart, and I'll give a tangible example. For me, that's my faith. That's prayer time, right? So I list out my outcomes or my behaviors, right? So for my heart, it's prayer time. For my mind, it's intentionally consuming either personal development or learning something. And then for my body, it's sweating, right? And so for each outcome, I have a model called the wedge of expectations. And this is how I teach this model. Entrepreneurs fail because they design their day for their best day and never take into account that they're going to get punched in the face when they wake up tomorrow morning and have nothing to fall back on. And so for each behavior, my faith being one of them, prayer time, I set a floor and a ceiling. So the floor is, on my worst day, what's the minimum I can commit to keep my word to myself? And my ceiling is, on my best day or my dream day, what do I want it to look like? And so for me, for my faith, it's an hour of scripture or prayer in the morning. On my worst day, it's 5 minutes in my Bible. Then in my body, my dream is an hour at the gym every day. My floor is a 20-minute walk outside. And then for my mindset, it's an hour of learning something. And my minimum is 10 pages of a book, right? And so I have the goal, but I also have the minimum. And so that's the floor and the ceiling. And so every day, and my first call is not till 10 a.m. every day, I have from when I drop my son off at school at 8:30 in the morning till 10 a.m. to hit at least my floor in every one of those buckets, or I'm not allowed to touch the needle movers in my business. And so I do that. And then even in my needle movers in my business, I have a floor and a ceiling. And so for me, I have a podcast, right? So like my ceiling is, okay, this week I'm going to record 3 podcasts. My floor is, I'm going to outline 3 ideas to make progress. Client work. My ceiling is, I'm going to respond to every client and answer their questions. My floor is, I'm going to acknowledge to each of them that I saw it and give them a deadline to get it back to them. And so I put a tangible, measurable workout on every single one of my behaviors, and single-handedly, it changed the game for me. And truthfully, losing the 100 pounds and keep it off. Like, I have a 6-pack at 40. I've never had one in my whole life. And it's effortless, is because I followed that model. And every morning I would get on my treadmill and I have my red lights next to me. And I would just walk for 30 minutes while consuming my mindset stuff and doing my faith.
Yeah.
And then the moment I was done, I'd go record a piece of content or post it. And so I call those the quadrants, like those 4 areas.
Dude, that's so funny. I literally have we used to operate on a quadrant of success. It's very, very similar to
Mm-hmm.
you on that. And it was wonderful. And I actually want to bring it back to, we used to have this little prayer thing that we would do, and each one of our fingers related to each one of the different quadrants. And so you'd say a little thing and tap to each one of them. And I also now understand why you kind of had a weird look when I said devil's chicken.
Oh, yeah. No, you're fine. You're fine.
I was just kidding, anyways. But I love that, man, and I love the ceiling and the floor thing. I used to do a thing, an accountability calendar, where I learned it from Jerry Seinfeld, where someone asked him about telling jokes and how did he stay consistent. And he talked about he would just write a joke a day and on his calendar. And once he had accrued maybe 2 weeks or something, he had a streak going. He didn't want to ruin the streak. And it helped him to continue to write. So what I used to do with my accountability calendar, I just wanted to write something that was brag worthy, that I felt good that I did that day. So it could have been surfing, yoga, help old lady with her groceries. Could have been anything, right? But at the end of the day, if I hadn't done it, if I just Netflix and chilled all day and felt like a slob or something, my floor was, well, you could do 50 push-ups, and that would be something to keep the streak going.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, there's a lot to be said about accountability, and then just having a plan in place.
That's it,
And
man.
it's
That's it.
huge.
There's two things that I can summarize because Simon Bowen, you know Simon, right? Him and I were keynoting together, and he said this when I was with him, and I loved it. He said, "Nobody can guarantee your success, but they can guarantee you a plan to get closer or achieve it." Right? The best coaches don't guarantee your success. Like the best Olympic coaches don't guarantee a gold medal,
Yeah.
but they guarantee you a path or plan to make progress. And to your point, if it stays up here, it's never done. And the way that I teach this to people is we overvalue intensity and undervalue consistency. And when we think about most entrepreneurs, they operate very, very well under pressure. Cash flow is down, leads are down, sales are down, and they use that pressure as fuel, not realizing it's a fleeting resource. But if you take consistent action, you win a whole lot longer in the span. And to your point, even the way that the floor is designed, as I say, everybody plans for their best day, but not their worst day. But like, you're going to have business failures. You're going to have an offer that doesn't work. You're going to have bankruptcy come in. You're going to have a business partner that leaves you. But truthfully, is the longer you delay your response, the more pain is caused. And so
Yeah.
that consistency keeps you going over and over. And I joke with people too. And like, I'll help my clients with this. And they're like, my workout. I'm like, what's your best? They're like, an hour at the gym a day. I'm like, what's your minimum? They're like, a 10-minute walk outside. I'm like, perfect. And I was like, let me know after your first couple walks if you only walked 10 minutes. And they're like, no, I went for 45 minutes. I'm like, yes, but if it was an hour, you would have justified that you can't go and you would have put it off again.
Yeah.
Right. Just
Yeah.
like with writer's block, right? Like as a copywriter. And I'm like, everyone's going to get writer's block. We all get it. Right. But if you let that writer's block get in the way, you're like, I'm not going to make any progress. But if you're like, hey, I'm just going to write a paragraph, all of a sudden you realize you're 6 pages into what you didn't think you could do because you found the first bite instead of trying to eat the entire elephant. And people really undervalue that consistency because, to my point of losing weight, I'd been a competitive athlete. I knew what to do. I was inconsistent because I let my schedule dictate it. So when I just went to steps, I was like, I'm just going to hit 10,000 steps a day and I'm going to try to front load my day. In a
Yeah.
year, I'd lost 100 pounds and I didn't even go to the gym. I was just doing
I can't
push-ups.
imagine you 100 pounds bigger. I mean, because I
Bro,
know
I'll message you the
sometimes
photo. Yeah,
I mean, but you're talking like belly fat?
bro. As soon as we're done, I will DM you the photos. It is mind blowing because
Wow.
also I would always wear giant black hoodies. And so I have
Oh,
big shoulders and a
mask
big
it.
chest. And so I would mask it. But yeah, like my pants right now are a size 30. I was a 44. And so it was like
Wow.
huge.
Yeah, my body type and the kind of clothes I wear masks my chub. But as I'm turning 50 soon too, so I mean, it's like it's showing,
Yeah.
and it sucks.
Yeah.
And but one last thing on consistency too. A lot of entrepreneurs that I know come to mind over the last 20 years, and some of the most successful, financially successful ones that I know are not the brightest guys. They're really not. They just have a certain type of work ethic and consistency over and over and over again. And I think that that's really encouraging because I look at guys that, I don't think I'm like intellectually superior, but I feel like I'm smarter than a lot of them. And I'm way behind business wise. And I'm like, well, why is that? And it's consistency.
Mm-hmm.
It's all it really is. And it's just every day doing a thing and making patterns and habits. And I've just we all have our patterns and habits. We're all consistent at something.
Yes.
you know,
Yes.
and it might
Yeah.
not be good, but we're all consistent. We all have subconscious like things going
Mhm.
on, and unless you get really intentional about what you want your day and your actions to look like, you're just going to default to that every time.
Yep, you nailed it, man. That's what it boils down to because it ends up to be more swings at bat, right? Like that's where consistency wins the game. I posted this a couple weeks ago. I said what you're not changing, you're choosing, right? And
Yeah, totally.
it's a constant invitation. And like, do I still binge YouTube Shorts sometimes? 1,000%. Do I still
Oh yeah,
doom scroll on Instagram? Do I get into like petty fights in Facebook comments, especially like on Jason's stuff sometimes? Of course, I come play in that bucket, right?
yeah.
But then, like, the moment I have that awareness, I'm like, oh, I could actually be outlining a podcast right now. I could go create my own piece of content right now. I could go do, and it's really when we bring it into our awareness and we just intentionally plant a seed for like what we want in the future. And then to your point, you have to build some discipline and protective measures around it because there's always going to be a reason to not go. There's always going to be a reason to not do it. But eventually I realized for me, I got sick of my own excuses and I'm like, oh, got it. Right. Like I should be a little bit uncomfortable right now. Like creating daily content is hard sometimes. And I was like, but the more I do it and the more videos we've done, like think about how many videos we've done collectively together. And everyone's like, why are you guys so good on video? And I'm like, well, I've done 30,000 of them.
Yeah,
Right?
totally.
Like, and it's just this thing that like the more you pour into it, the more you're going to get out of it, but you have to protect it, whether you feel like it or not, because motivation doesn't exist. It comes on the other side of intentional evidence that creates that action. And
Yeah.
consistency is the best way to get into it. But I feel like the easiest way to win that game is to also set yourself up to win. And you're of an age, but it brings me to that movie, What About Bob with Bill Murray? It's just
Oh
baby
yeah.
steps, right? Like
Yeah.
genuinely, it's just baby steps over and over and over and over again. And if I think about being consistent, and I only write, let's say 10 minutes a day over 365 days, but you wait till you're inspired to write for an hour, I'm still going to be ahead of you 4 to 5 times by putting in that minimal
Totally.
investment.
Which brings me to the cliche thing that's always said, like you're the average of the 4 or 5 people that you spend the most time with. And it's huge because if I'm spending time with you in Montana, I know that, kind of what to expect.
Yeah.
We're probably not going to sit there and play Madden all
Nope.
day.
Nope. No, I'll be like, hey, bro, we can play Madden. We're just going to earn it.
Yeah. So I think, if you want to surround yourself with some really cool people, I want you to check out mindofgeorge.com/event. George's got an event coming up in April in Montana, one of the coolest places in the world. Check out his website, mindofgeorge.com as well. Thank you for coming on the show, bro.
Bro, so
I knew it'd be great. I don't know why we waited so long to actually
me,
connect.
me neither. Me neither. We just did this asynchronous thing really, really well. So now it's synchronous. I'm a big fan of this.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm happy to let you know this show is pretty new, and I have no real plan for guests other than I just in my head I want to talk to that guy,
Yeah.
that gal. That's all it is. Like if I want to talk to that person, and so I'm glad we talked, man. Thanks for
Me
coming
too,
on.
man. Me too. And thank you for being here. To everybody, you'll see the pinkest website you'll ever see. It's my favorite color, but I managed to own it and make my website pink too. So
Yeah, good
be
job, buddy.
authentic. But
Take
yeah,
care,
I
man.
appreciate it, man. And thanks for having me, man. We'll do this again. This is a blast.